IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we discuss the story of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Welcome to an all-new episode on the Musafir Stories. Saif and I would like to wish you a very, very happy Deepavali. May there be light and color in all our lives. Not long ago, we covered a great episode with Rajat Ubhaykar. It was about traveling in India on trucks. It's episode 61 for anybody who wants to go back and listen to it. Now, we are so happy to announce that Rajat has published a book based on his travels. It's called Truck Day India. As a token of appreciation, we are giving away a free copy of Rajat's book to one lucky winner. Please check out this episode's show notes or head over to our social media page. All you have to do is answer 2 simple questions based on Rajat's episode and write back to us. Our email is themusafirstories@gmail.com. One lucky winner will be announced in the next episode. So you have 2 weeks, guys. Good luck. A few more announcements before we begin with today's episode. A big shout out to our listeners who took time and who wrote to us. Anushka, Arjun and Kishore Gupta. Thanks a ton for your support. It's all that we need. Now, lastly, as promised, we have the winner or the winners of the Get Featured on the Musafir Story contest. Congratulations, Tarun and Sangeetha. We will reach out to you and schedule a recording session really soon. So finally, with today's episode, we take you to a hidden and an often overlooked gem of the northeastern state of India with the Nomadic Thunker, Elita.
So with that introduction, I'd like to welcome Elita, a facilitator and a blogger to the Musafir Stories. Elita, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and welcome.
Welcome, Elita.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible pleasure.
Thank you. I think just a little bit of a context to the listeners. I had the good fortune of being a part of one of Elita's workshops. I'm lucky to have been a part of that. And since then, it had been on my mind to have you on the podcast, and really glad to have you today. But why don't we kick this off by Elita, you giving us a little bit of a background about both your workshops that you facilitate and your blog as well.
Yes, I've been blogging under the pseudonym of Nomadic Thunker for a few years now, and I've had an affinity for writing and blogging, but I think it got real shape only because of travel. And this was also a little later after getting into travel. I traveled solo for the first time in 2012, but I actually put up a blog about travel only in late 2013, which was after I got back from Ladakh. That experience of like shaping and building up that identity and having a blog, which is now a website, and this identity called Nomadic Thunker is also what has been the inspiration behind the workshops that I do.
So I was going to ask you, the workshops are called Be You for You. These are expressive writing workshops. And please tell us a little bit more about that and to our listeners also, Elita.
Yes, like you've already said, Be You for You is the other workshops that I do. These are workshops on expressive writing. And expressive writing is different from creative writing. The way I like to put it very succinctly is that expressive writing is step 0 to creative writing, or any other form of sort of professional writing or audience related writing that one might be required to do. And what I mean by that is sometimes you just need to flesh out ideas, put a dump of thoughts on paper, sometimes just work through emotional funk and get it out of the way because it's too much of pressure on cognitive abilities to like process.
Yeah, I think very, very well put, and a very, very useful workshop also. I think the best thing I could say about the workshop is you have to go be a part of these workshops to kind of understand the kind of things you get out of it.
Yeah, and I remember Saif attending the workshop and he came back and he was raving about it. And then when I read your blog a few days back, I have to tell you that it was amazing. I had that mixed feeling of connect where I could feel that a person is telling me their part of their story of their travel, and I had the feeling that I have traveled there myself. So it was a mixed feling when I was reading your blog through. So I think it comes through. Your writing is perfect.
Yeah, it does come through in the blog as well. And for those of us who were getting a little curious about the travel writing you do, and also the travel stories that we'd like to share with them. So just wanted to ask you where you're taking us and our listeners to today, Elita.
Yes, I am going to be sharing about Manipur today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. Uh-huh.
Northeast India has a very fond and fascinating place in my heart. So I will be sharing my experiences of having traveled to the state. This was in early 2017. This was Jan 2017, in fact. Mm-hmm. And I had on my agenda that I wanted to sort of visit and travel Northeast India before I began thinking of other countries, beyond the borders of my country. So and the Northeast was a place that had since forever been on my back burner. I spent around 4 days in Manipur. Okay. And a little background to this is that Manipur almost didn't happen. Like that plan to get to the state almost didn't materialize, because since October of 2016, which is about 3 months before I managed to make the trip happen, the state had been through an economic blockade. So there were bunds pretty much throughout the entire state, and that meant that there was as good as no transport. That meant that most of the shops were shut. That meant that the atmosphere itself was kind of tense. So I was already in Tripura previously. So what I got lucky with while I was planning my Northeast bit that time in 2017 was that I had managed to bag like relatively cheap flights to 3 states. So that included Tripura, Manipur, and Mizoram. I flew from Agartala into Imphal, which also meant that I was putting myself at a lower risk of, coming across any band-like situations if I was traveling by road. Once we got off, I was traveling with a friend. So once we got off was when the sort of enormity of what the ground reality was hit me, because all around me I could just see army personnel.
And just to give a little bit of a context about that, right? The army presence that you're telling, that also has been, I think, one of the things that has been ever so frequently on and off in Manipur, right? Because there has been a lot of ethnic strife. Then there's also been call for a separate state at times also. So because of that is what you see, that is why you see a lot of army presence in this one, because a lot of insurgent groups are also a part of groups that operate within the political spectrum of Manipur, right? That is one of the reasons why a lot of folks, I think, have these second thoughts about is it okay? Should I go there or should I skip Manipur, right? So that's one of the reasons, and I think it's a great decision that you took. And you said about 4 days is the time you spent there, right, Arita?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As you said, it's maybe not enough, but about say 4 to 5 days might be good enough time, you think, to visit the important spots within Manipur, you feel?
In terms of duration, I would say keep a minimum of 4 days if someone's on a really tight schedule, because it's healthy and it's, I think, also commonsensical to keep in mind that maybe you might encounter a day-long band, while you're there. So if you're getting into Manipur with like a strict 2 day timeline, and because you want to also go to Nagaland or you want to go to Assam because you're already in the northeast and you're reserving like just 2 days to explore perhaps only Imphal and get out, or maybe like your health gives way, right? So it just helps to have that buffer, but just in general to be able to like soak in a place for the way it is, a minimum of 4 days is definitely a requirement, a basic requirement.
Okay. So, yeah, as you say, a buffer day for any travel for that matter, a buffer day is always advisable. And now you used Imphal as your base and traveled from here.
So I used Imphal as my base, and just one more like point I'd like to add about connectivity is that uh, most of the places, irrespective of how well known it is to someone who's from the from mainland India, are relatively easier and well connected from Guwahati. So even if someone is making Guwahati their base, and you can explore traveling by road, and there are multiple options. So there are buses, there are shared taxis, and so that there's a whole gamut of those options also available. And I'm saying this particularly say for someone who is keen on roughing it out or is traveling on budget. I got lucky with flight tickets, but I don't know whether that's going to be a possibility any other time. So if someone wants to keep their like manage it on the budget side and is willing to travel by road, then that option exists. Train wise, Silchar in Assam is sort of the southernmost like rail head that is possible, and again Silchar is very well connected to Guwahati. Another option is Dibrugarh, but that's a little too far away. So these are, again, I'm saying possibilities that one can explore, especially if they are looking at a budget travel. But if someone has no restraints on the financial side and wants to make the most of limited time, then for sure flights are an option.
Okay. So starting off with the itinerary in itself, right? Tell us where you headed out first once you were in Imphal, and then you not acclimatized really, but once you were settled in,
Yeah.
Where do you head off to first?
So the moment we landed, and of course, like I was talking about that intimidating scenario with a lot of like army presence, we realized that the sort of taxi system at the airport had like exorbitant prices, as is sort of the case with most airports. So what we did was we approached one of the CRPF Jawans and just asked them like, what is an alternative way to like find our way out of the airport to Imphal city, and it was they who suggested that the option of shared autos exist. And again, I bring this up because there is again like this perception that exists around folks from the army and about how villainous they can be. But yeah, we sort of just walked up to them and just general sort of tourist-based traveler transport kind of question, and they were very forthcoming, and they're like, yeah, don't go by the taxi auto system inside the airport, it is going to be expensive. Just head out, cross the road, you will find the shared rickshaws there, and you can hop into one, which is exactly what we did. And I think we traveled at like 1/10 of the cost we otherwise might have ended up spending. So got to Imphal city, found our way to the hotel we were staying at, which was sort of close to the local police station there, which gave us a little bit of comfort, just given the kind of environment we were in. And we sort of dumped our bags and then just decided to sort of walk down to the women's market, which is Ima Kaital or Khwairam Band Bazaar,
Okay.
which is, so Ima is Manipuri for mother.
Okay.
And so this is mother's market or women's market. And what makes it special is that this is an entire market run purely and solely by women. So there is no male figure operating or selling anything there. The only men you will see at this market are men who have come there to purchase something. There aren't any male
So we're not
sellers.
banned from
And
there,
it's-
right?
You're not banned from there. You're absolutely not banned from there. And it's such a different environment to be in, because your typical market like vibe is one that's tends to be like supremely aggressive, like everyone shouting on top of their voices, ensuring that the customer or the client sort of comes to theirs and they pick stuff up from them, and there's this whole thing of don't take my customer away. Here there was like a complete like absence of any of this, shouting on top of each other's voice. People, like the women, were like very comfortable with where they were. When a buyer came to them, they had the conversation with them, the exchange would take place, and things just moved so smoothly. And of course, we were very obvious to everyone there because we clearly stood out as outsiders. But at no point was there a sense of questioning who we were in an interrogative manner. It was more from a space of curiosity. It was all smiles from there. We didn't, like, there weren't too many of them who spoke Hindi that well. So it was a very different kind of communication because there were a lot of smiles exchange. There was a lot of like charades and a lot of like hand movement and things like that to just sort of communicate and talk. Some spoke Hindi, and so they would get a little extra chatty with us, asking us how long we were staying. So it was instantly a very welcoming experience, and that's why I've gone into like a little bit of detail of what it looks like. Because
And just out of curiosity, like what are the things one can buy here, or what are the things that people sell here?
so everything from like your vegetables to fish, fruits, flowers, household items, be it your utensils, cleaning equipment, household stuff, things you need for even your ceremonial purposes, or related to puja. So whether it's your agarbatti and your candle, so literally everything under the sun.
One of the things that even I saw was that this is perhaps one of the oldest market across the world, that is not even just
Yeah.
India, that has been run and managed by women only, right? So that way also it's very, very kind of impressive, right? By the way it's been run, and especially like as you said, again, this is just the mindset of some of us folks from the cities, that these places might be a little backward and misogynistic and all that stuff, but here you have a living example of a market that's been completely managed and operated by women. So that speaks volumes, I think, of how independent they are, and also volumes about the kind of misinformation and or lack of information there is about the place, which is why, again, I keep repeating this. I wanted to bring this out through the podcast to the listeners as to what places like Manipur have to offer. So did you do some shopping here while you were at the market?
Because this was like the first day itself, and a lot of what I was seeing around me was just mostly like food items. I don't know whether this is a selective way of like looking at things that are of importance to me, but yeah, so I just ended up picking up a lot of like edible stuff, which I just prefer to like consume right away while I'm there, rather than stacking up on like like your chips and stuff, which are anyway coming from elsewhere and also aren't healthy. And some of these women were so like, they warmed up to us so much that they just voluntarily started offering us fruits. Like, someone offered us apple, someone offered us something else. It was just, yeah, I think this was like such a beautiful welcome. I had forgotten that we just walked through a sea of army personnel at the airport, because honestly that was like the beginning and the end of any kind of like tension or intimidation that I experienced in Manipur, because the remainder of my time was just filled with experiences like the one I had at the women's market. But yeah, we just ended up picking up like stuff to eat because food is priority.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So yeah, I think this is also a welcome window, and also a great way of kind of not really breaking the ice, but kind of getting familiar with the surroundings, right? I think it's a great way of doing that too. So after having spent some time here, what was next on your list, Elita?
Day one was just essentially getting familiar with Imphal, since yes, that was our base while we were there in Manipur, and also trying to just figure out which of the other places that I had in mind were even doable given the reality, of how things were. The economic blockade had been already on for like 4 months, so things were still tense. There was some degrees of relaxation, but there was also like it wasn't completely not there. So on day two, we made our way to the Indo-Myanmar border. So More is the sort of Indian town on the border, and Tamu is the Myanmar town on
Right.
the other side of the border. And this place again has a lot of like cultural, historical significance. And I have to be honest, I knew nothing about this until I reached Manipur, or was making my sort of plan to reach Manipur. And then someone else mentioned it to me, and it was just fascinating how little one ends up knowing about it until, say, you're like, drawing up an itinerary, or like, trying to get to know a place better. So I do consider travel to be like the biggest enabler of like shooing away any and every kind and form of ignorance. So I knew about Moreh. Moreh was a little more than 100 kilometers away from Imphal. A private taxi was just not working out, and even for the ones that were, it was proving to be supremely expensive. So I ditched that idea, and then someone somehow mentioned to us that there are shared taxis that fly between Imphal and Moreh, and I was like, I am taking this now. These shared taxis operate like super early in the morning. So that's, and by super early I mean like at 4:30 a.m. And so we were on the streets, literally like looking out for like what might resemble a shared taxi. We found one, managed to like negotiate the price. I don't remember exactly how much we paid, but I think it was around 500 or something. And we were returning back the same day, so I didn't intend on staying at Moreh. I just wanted to get to there, see it, spend a few hours maybe, and then come back. And the same shared taxi driver was going to come back any which way, so that just made things a lot easier. We took off in the morning. We found like once we were in it, we were like, okay, this is going to be interesting. We had two army sort of checkpoints until we got to Moreh, and both have like served as anecdotal points for me, because so throughout that bit where we until we arrived at the first checkpoint, we barely saw anyone on the streets. Yes, it was like 4:35 in the morning, but even in general, like there was no one out there. But the view was gorgeous, except that we couldn't take photographs. So we were zooming in a shared taxi and just not knowing whether it's the right thing to do. So we just like tried not giving into the urge of like, yeah, doing the wrong thing, even if unintentionally. So it was just amazing. Like the sun was just rising, and the crispness of the morning, the dew sort of fading away. So it was like I was just like glued to the window. Like my sleep, I barely slept. Like we slept a little late that night, and then by 4:30 we were already out of the streets. But I was like, I was not sleep deprived. We arrived at our first checkpoint, and suddenly it was like there was like a whole tense environment. So each one of us, like there were about three or four other co-passengers with us. These are all locals getting from Imphal to Moreh, either to they lived in Moreh, or they were going to purchase something from the market there, or going to sort of send stuff to the market there. So we had like other co-passengers with us, and at the first army checkpoint we all were required to get down, and army officers reached out to like individually sort of began speaking to every one of us. We were asked for our ID proof. And so when it came to me and my friend, not that our face hadn't given it away, but then clearly we were not from the state, we were outsiders. And so this can go either way, right? Like sometimes it just means more questions, but then what I've seen work is if you're not acting extra smart, and you just like abide by the protocol, things work out really smoothly, and sometimes you're left with a little surprise. So what happened in my case was, I showed my ID proof, so they saw the address, they realized you're from Bombay. So the sort of standard questions are, why are you here, how long are you here for, how did you come to know about this place, why are you going to Moreh? Because even for them to see tourists go to Moreh was a little like skeptical-ish. So they're like, how did you come to know about it? Why are you keen on going there? It's just another market. So, I had to play it very cool, because they weren't intending on triggering me. They were just like extra curious. So I just like played along and like responded to their questions. And then one of the army officers asked me if I knew Marathi. And so I was like, yes, I do. And then within seconds, we were like, I'm miles away from home and I'm chatting with an army officer in Marathi in Manipur.
Oh, nice.
Like immediately, like tension in the air has like broken. And like, you like, and by this I mean it's such a visual thing, right? Like all throughout these army personnel had like super serious faces, like no emotion, absolutely expressionless. And then the moment we start chatting, like again, like, just like small talk conversation in Marathi, like there's a smile. The eyes lighten up a bit, the like, the lips sort of curve up, and you can see like there's an immediate like thaw of any kind of like tension that was there earlier. So what I did was I seized the moment, and then I sort of asked for permission if we could take photos. And they and they obliged, but they also told us like, you can take only this side and you can't take that side, because
Right.
those are like army areas.
Okay.
So obviously for like reasons of security, you're not allowed to, and that's completely fine. And which is why I'm like, I always say like, ask for permission and see what happens. Like there's no need to like get into daredevilry that is not required, because it can get you into serious trouble.
And also, Elita, I think I forgot asking this at the beginning of the conversation, but does Manipur require an ILP, an inner line permit, or is it not one of these?
It does not,
right?
I
Yeah.
bet.
So I was just.
It does not. Mizoram, Arunachal, and Nagaland are the 3 states of Northeast India that require you to obtain an inner line permit. Manipur does not need you to get an inner line permit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, carry on, please.
Yeah, which is why they just asked us for a like ID proof. Anywhere else in like, so when it was either Arunachal or Nagaland or Mizoram, we didn't need to like show any other ID proof if we had our ILP, the inner line permit on us. So which is why in Manipur it was, you need to have a government recognized ID proof, a photo ID proof on you, and that's all it sort of requires. So then we had another checkpoint, and this was a little more like structured and formal. So they had like you walk through a metal scanner, and then there are female guards that inspect female sort of females who are crossing that section, and then there are male army personnel checking in on males who are passing in. So we sort of walked through that, bags were scanned, ID proofs were shown again. And then we also had to like walk a bit, like, so perhaps like 200 meters, but like, so the vehicle goes separately, but you walk that stretch separately. So you don't get to sit back into the Jeep or the taxi right after you're checked. So we walked that bit, and on the other end, there were again 2 army personnel who again were curious with our presence in that part of the country. And so a similar conversation played out.
In Marathi again?
No, so it started off in Hindi. So this one was a Hindi conversation. So kahan se aap yahan pe kyun aaye hain? And then they also like, got a little chatty, which was interesting, because then they were talking about how previously they were posted somewhere in Himachal, and just like talking about stuff like that. And then the regular question, like, what do you do? Are you a student? And I'm like, no, I'm working. Acha, what do you do? So I was like, I'm a writer. I write about places I travel to. And again, that sort of opened up like another like window to the conversation. And they're like, oh, so what will you write about this place? And so I said I'll write about like the people I'm meeting, these conversations that I'm having, exactly like the one I'm having with you, and whatever else I get to see at the border there, because I'm very curious. I've only heard about it from other people, and something about that, I don't know, triggered like, I don't know, warmed them up a little bit more, and they just fished out like 2 chocolates, and then gave it to the 2 of us, and they're like, oh, that's good. I hope you have a great trip, and I hope you like what you see at the border. Do write about it. Do write about us also, and don't forget us. And
maybe it was a little bit of a bribe also to write about them. I'm just joking.
I mean, if it works, like, like if this is an experience that I like, which if I share, and I have shared, and talking about it, like, just allows for people to look at scenarios and circumstances and people through more than one lens, then I am more than happy to sort of, talk about these experiences, write about these experiences. Because we tend to get caught up in our biases and prejudices, and our lack of information, right? So
absolutely, and that is also. I mean, I'm sorry to interject, but I think it is also. We look at them as army personnel only, right? And we sometimes fail to look at them through the eyes that they're also humans. They're also people who are living away from their homes, like miles and miles. away from their homes.
Exactly.
And some of these questions they ask also, I mean, obviously it's a part of the protocol and everything, but sometimes even they are curious. They haven't had a chance to, like in your case, speak with someone in Marathi maybe for a while, right? So things like that also is something. So
Yeah,
you don't have to like have a knee-jerk reaction to such questions. Just like you said, play along cool and be a part of the conversation. Sometimes you might end up having conversations that you'll treasure for a long time, like in your case, right?
absolutely. Space. So yeah, I mean, we had our little chocolates handed to us, and with that, we were done with like the last bit of the stopover, and we had reached the border. We had reached More by 10 a.m. So it took us about like 4 hours, 4.5 hours with all these stopovers and things like that. And yeah, so we didn't know what to
Yeah, so what
expect.
is it? I mean, what does More have from a visitor's point of
So
view?
I mean, it's a border
Okay.
town, right? So there isn't necessarily like a point of interest, but it's a border town that has like a lot of this historical and cultural significance that I mentioned
Right.
earlier, because it's been one of the more legit and recognized entry exit points between India and Myanmar. Like the fact that one can drive from India all the way to Thailand, like there's a road that exists now that is accessible, that sort of got a little viral across the internet, I think about 2 or 3 years ago. So More is that point from where you begin from India, and then you get to Myanmar, and then you get to
Yeah, I
Thailand.
think it's also seen as the, like as you said, it's seen as that easternmost frontier of India,
Yeah.
which connects India to the rest of South and Southeast Asia, right? So that way also it's in one way
Yes.
significant. And yeah, obviously being a border town and opening up to the rest of Southeast Asia, this also happens to be sort of a trading hub. I mean, not a big commercial hub like
Yeah, yeah,
Mumbai,
yeah.
obviously, but a trading hub of sorts, right? So I think that's something of significance also.
It is, and also I think given the background and history of Myanmar, and all the political shifts that have been taking place over the past few years, going from military coup to democracy and all of that, More and Tamu in that sense have sort of borne the effect or the impact of that. So yeah, I mean, I really didn't know what to expect. I just heard about it, and everyone, as in I'd spoken to two other people who mentioned it to me, and they had just said that you have to go to More if you're in Imphal. And so we arrived there, but we were again hungry because we not had breakfast. So we first grabbed breakfast and then walked towards the border. So it was just army personnel on this side and army personnel on the other end. We just showed them our government approved ID proofs, and we were allowed to sort of get to the other side. And again, I was just curious whether we could take
Right, right.
photographs, because again, I didn't know the degree of sensitivity involved. I didn't know, what is the protocol. And so one personnel said it was not allowed and forbidden, and someone else said that yes, you could. And so I was just very conflicted because I didn't know which way this was going to end up playing for me. I just kept it low key. I just put my camera aside and I was like, I don't want this to like get me into any extra attention than I need and require. I just want to absorb and soak and see what this place is about. And so we walked through. It's a market, I mean, if I have to put it in very plain speak language, it's a market. It's a wholesale market. Everything under the sun is
Mhm.
available. Indian traders get to bring their stuff here and sort of make that exchange. And so goods and supplies that are needed in Myanmar are then made available. Anything that needs to get from Myanmar to India is sort of crossed over. So that's sort of the primary thing, but it gave me a little bit of a flavor of Myanmar at the
Right.
border itself. And I always find that the most fascinating part about border towns is that how immediately you are transported into a culture that is so different from
Right.
yours. Um, I've experienced this at the Indo-Bhutan border at New Jaigaon and Phuntsholing. And I had a similar experience even here, because, one moment you're in India, so it's like noisy and people are everywhere. And of course, there are, um pan stains everywhere and all of that. And you like literally just walk, like you've just like waltzed into and you've gone to the other side, and it's different. Like there are people with sandalwood paste on their cheeks. Suddenly, Hindi is not a language anyone is speaking or even remotely recognizing. Facial features are different. Clothing is different. The food that is, visible, especially food
Yeah,
that's
tell
being.
us about that. I've been waiting to ask you, have you, or was that a little bit of a challenge? I know language, you said, was a little bit of a barrier, even Manipur for that matter, right? So, how was the food scene?
So here at More, and once we got to Tamu, so in Tamu we got a bit of a taste of food in Myanmar, but not high end stuff, like just your regular street food kind of food. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to articulate or express the question because the language was a barrier. So I couldn't no
Right.
amount of asking them what the name of that particular dish was got me any answers. So I just came back with pictures of the food. But there were so these were like mini pancake or like those mini idlis that we have. Like, so on those,
Hmm.
they had like a little liquidy preparation that they would pour, and then that would be heated and then fried and then served with like some chutney. And there was no way of me just being able to gauge what it's called. I came back and tried to Google it by like putting in all the ways in which I could describe it, but I haven't come across the name yet.
And how much time did you spend here? Like you were planning on returning back on the same day, you said, right?
Yeah, so before we got off our taxi, the shared taxi that we had come in, the driver told us that try and be here like at least by 2 because it we needed to get back to Imphal before it got dark.
Right, right.
This was again just in keeping with the protocol of, just how the whole Band like situation was in and around Imphal. It was just, it's like better safe than sorry. So let's get back before it's dark. And it made complete sense. We, of course, because we weren't purchasing anything necessarily, we were like done by like 12:31, and so we found our way back, and so our driver was completely amused that we didn't really like shop, and we're like, we just came to see what it's like, and it was about the experience. And he's like, no, 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 people come. And so, and then we could see like some of the other folks had like bought cycles and like a whole host of other things, and it was just amazing, just that what that experience looked like. And so with that we came back, and so that was day 2. On day 3, we decided to go visit the Loktak Lake, which is again the largest freshwater lake in Northeast India and is known for the floating. So the Fumdis, there's not like a proper literal translation, but they're called floating islands, but that's again not a apt description for it. They're like circularish land, like natural formations that are seen floating over it, and it just adds to the natural beauty of it.
Yeah, basically like weeds, right? They're basically weeds and other kind of plants that form islands on the
Plant,
lake.
yeah, aquatic vegetation,
Right.
which just makes it all look really pretty and gorgeous. And
How far away from Manipur was the from Imphal was this?
I think about a 2 hour
Okay.
journey. So what we had done was we hopped into the local bus. Again, found very easily at at Imphal market itself. And so again, through a lot of like sign language and trying to like communicate to get people to tell us which bus would take us to Loktak, finally found one. I have to add here to the listeners is that don't if you're going the way we did, which is using public transport, ask for Moirang or ask for Sendra, because these are that's the place that's closest to the point where you can get off to view Loktak Lake. Now, if you, like us, ask people that you want to get to Loktak, then it's a separate stop, and it is actually a stop to a hydroelectric power station, which is nowhere close to the entry point for
Lake,
the
right.
lake. Like, so there's you don't get to view it at all. So we had to like then hop into another bus and then get to somewhere else and then eventually get back. And there's a little visitor slash tourist center that's been created on a slightly uphill area. And so you can just go in there and, there's a little restaurant kind of cafe that serves like a few edible stuff. So your tea, coffee, and maybe like some light snacks. So you can just go there and make yourself comfortable. And there are little like benches that are perched along the place that allow you to just sit and like gaze at the lake right in front of you.
Beautiful.
Which is, yeah, the best thing to do, because there are options to stay on Loktak, and there are houseboats, and there are many of these other like ways in which you can sort of be there. But I honestly didn't know about that option. Um, so we just made the most of like getting to Loktak and gazing at it and staring at it. We were also waiting for the haze to sort of disappear because we could get a clearer view of it, also known as get to take photographs. But in terms of like getting a proper view of the lake, I think being on that flight from Agartala to Imphal allowed us to get an aerial view
Oh,
of
okay.
Loktak Lake, which was by far the most stunning views I have ever had an opportunity to see from like an airplane ever. So one of the interesting things about Loktak is and this, if I'm not mistaken, is the national animal of Manipur, is the Sangai deer. Um, and so this deer had like, because again of how it looks visually, it seems like it's walking on water. But then again, because of the aquatic vegetation, this animal is like able to be so agile and like walk through it all that like if you're viewing it from the outside, it looks like the Shanghai deer is actually walking on water. And so it took me back to actually a lesson that we had in school, like when I was like I think either in the eighth or the ninth, and that's how I like had vivid memories of like the Shanghai deer, and sort of that made me want to like uh, just like smile to myself, because I was like, I am finally in Manipur, and like it just brings back lessons that otherwise don't seem that relevant. Um, and so there is a national park, I believe, that one can visit and access. There is also the Sangai festival that is organized by the government of Manipur. So there's that. So in terms of natural beauty, and like for someone who is like very keen on that side of things when they go to places, then they should definitely consider exploring this alternative and spending more time at Loktak.
Yeah, I believe it's the Kibul Lamjaw. I'm probably
Yes,
butchering the name,
yes,
but that's the
yes,
national park, and it's believed to be a floating national park of sorts, right? Because, like you said, it is on
yes.
a biomass of vegetation, basically, and brown antlered deer. I guess that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, yeah. So it's locally called the Sangai. Yeah, yeah. And also for someone like who's like, earlier when we were talking about for folks who are looking at a shorter trip, and instead of trying to squeeze everything in, I would perhaps recommend then just keep Loktak as your base and explore that area, because, between experiencing the national park and like, being just there at the lake itself and living on the lake, if you can find that information for yourself, because those options do exist. I think you'll still come back with a fairly like a well-rounded experience.
That way, it's good. But what about you? How much time did you spend at Loktak?
I think we spent about 3 to 4 hours because it was also beginning to get hotter. So that just ends up becoming the decider of how long you end up spending, because you're sitting outside and there's not necessarily shade or any place to take cover with. So at some point it just begins to get hot. And to be fair, like there's only so much of the lake that you want to keep looking at, because not much changes or shifts. Like in the morning when we got there, we got to see like the local fisher folk getting on with their day, casting their nets, some of them exchanging things as they were on their boats. So there was some of that activity to like just observe and watch from a distance, which is fascinating, which is interesting. But at some point, all of it sort of just fades into the background. It's just pure stillness, which isn't too bad, except that yeah, the sun
Right.
begins to get a little unbearable. So, and then we made our way to the INA Memorial Complex, which is also at Moirang.
Right.
This place, quite interestingly, gave us a very good perspective on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. It gave us perspective on the locals who had fought during World War II. And so there were many of those micro stories, because there are memorials, there are photos, there are, written documentation, letters that were exchanged between different people. Some degree of like clothing, some personal belongings that have all been like saved, treasured, and placed in this museum. That I don't want to say refreshing, but it's because in so many ways it's heartbreaking. And I say heartbreaking because it just takes me back to how little history books covered about these aspects of the country. And I've experienced this more than once, having like made more than one visit to the Northeast, because there's so much of a role that the indigenous communities of those states have played in thwarting the advance of the Japanese troops during World War.
Absolutely. I think, it's a very little known fact, I think, that Manipur and Nagaland were the only two states from India, right, that were involved in some way during the Second World War. And even before that, even against the British for that matter, these are the people who fought there even when the British tried to get here, right? So there have been like Anglo-Naga wars, and then even the people of Manipur have fought there. And this specific piece about INA, right, the Indian National Army, which was founded by Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, like you're mentioning, that also has a very significant part to play in one way in the freedom struggle of India, right? Because it was I think in a certain way that made our freedom struggle a little more, it gave a political context to it, even though he wasn't successful eventually, but in some way it brought up the cause of Indian independence on the international stage, is what I feel. So like you mentioned, it's very I won't say conflicting, but like a curious point, right? Here we have on one side so some of the Indian soldiers fighting on the side of the British, and then there's Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose who's fighting with the Japanese, right, in the Second World War. So we're part of the same country, but we're on two separate sides in one way, right?
Different sides.
But again, it also, like going back to my earlier point, that his mission was the same. It was to bring up the Indian freedom struggle at an international stage, and I think that did eventually achieve its aim of bringing out, and it was not long after this that the Britishers left here also, right? So that way also it's an important place, I guess, right? The INA complex, and there's also a few other memorials I read, the World War II memorials, right, that are in this place. So again, a little bit of history, and very significant history that a lot of our history books do not cover. Like, who would have known? Growing up, I don't know, I probably was reading the wrong books or whatever, but I never knew that Nagaland and Manipur had some part to play in the Second World War, for example. So it just doesn't get enough mainstream focus, right?
It's heartbreaking because of all the conversations that somehow end up taking place about how we've alienated Northeast, in terms of just because of where it's located geographically away from the rest of the mainland. That has also sort of robbed us of the role, the contribution, the richness, the diversity of that part of the country as well.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, like you said, very significant bit of history there also. And this is on the way back that you made the stop, right? So after this, did you just head back to Imphal, Elita?
Yeah, so we decided to sort of take the bus back, but there was some delay with the buses, and so again, another interesting anecdote, because we were standing at the bus stop and there was a lady approaching us, and she also stood at the bus stop. She was a local on her way to Imphal, and it was she who broke the ice. So she smiled at us, and she spoke Hindi, so that made things a lot easier for us. So she was insistent that we eat at this local hotel, which served very typical Manipuri dishes, which, without having asked her, she was sure that our hotel wasn't going to serve us, which she was right about, because you get a lot of generic North Indian food when you're staying at a hotel. And so she was very keen that we go and eat at this restaurant. So she ushered us in there. Now, what had happened was by the time we got to that that restaurant, it was around 2 in the afternoon, which means that it was way past the sort of typical lunchtime. So they were shutting down. She went into the kitchen and spoke to sort of, I don't know, the person who sort of manages it there, and said that, listen, there are these two girls, they're not from here, it's their last day. They should really eat the food from here so they understand what Manipuri food is. They've been eating hotel ka food, which is not worth it. She managed to convince them. And so some of the dishes they had sort of run out of, because it's a really popular place. So they said that, see, all the dishes won't be available. She's like, it's okay, whatever you have, just serve them, let them eat, they're also hungry. And so before we knew it, we had like two big massive thalis of authentic Manipuri food in front of us. I kid you not, it was so much. I had a really troublesome time trying to finish it because I don't like wasting food. And I was just thinking to myself all throughout, what if all the items were actually available? Like, this is a thali where half the food items were over. I just don't know how I would have managed if all the food items were on it. But there's one vegetable that is pretty much like the staple, and what I mean by staple is in the way in which potato, aloo, is like so common in like most of like our dishes, whether it's North India or whether it's even in western parts of the country. There's a vegetable that's called longcha. I don't know how to explain it, but this is like this is one thing that is it's a staple that is consumed in Manipur, and it's also quite core to Manipuri cuisine. Manipur also, like with most of Northeast, consumes what's called sticky rice.
Right.
That is also like just a different experience, because while most of India is a rice consuming country, with Northeast, it's just that this type of rice and the way it's prepared is different. Yeah, and so like there are these bits about the cuisine, that sort of the food that typically stands out.
Right, and I think it was good that at least on your last day you had like a local take you to one of the authentic places and have try this out, right? Otherwise, you perhaps would have been.
Yeah, it was really sweet of her to like just be that insistent about,
right,
taking us there and ensuring that we got a flavor of it, and it was absolutely worth it because the food there is also priced quite reasonably.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. So this is back in Imphal now. Was this your last day, or was the day after this the buffer day you had, or did you have more things planned for the next day?
So the day after this was my buffer day. So it also turned out to be that was January 26th, so Republic Day.
Oh, okay.
Just generally being a national holiday, as well as one that can sometimes has a lot of like tension around it. We chose to like play it low. We couldn't go to any other place, like say the Kangla Fort in Imphal, because it was shut that day. The Kangla Fort is where the official flag hoisting and like the Republic Day sort of celebrations take place. So it's closed to outsiders at other hours, so we couldn't like get in and see it. And also because I didn't want to just be sitting in my hotel room that day, so we sort of just walked to the Imphal War Cemetery on the 26th, because it was open. It's a public space, so there wasn't any restriction as such on that front. And so that was what I did on the final day. And then on the 27th was when we were leaving, so flying out of Imphal.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you literally walked us through your 4 days there in a very detailed fashion. And I bet this is very useful for somebody who's planning trip to Manipur, right? So thank you so much for drawing this out in a detailed fashion. And there is obviously much more to Manipur than this. It's a culturally also very, very rich place in terms of the history, the kind of history that it has. And I did not know for a fact that polo, the sport, was apparently it apparently has its origins from Manipur. The Britishers picked it up from Manipur, and while they were here, and obviously there's other interesting places also, like I hear the Zuko Valley trek also. It can be done from Manipur or from Nagaland, being a border kind of a valley, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
another thing that one can indulge in if you plan to more long drawn itinerary.
Absolutely.
There's also a couple of interesting caves that I read about. The Thalon cave, I guess that is, so underground caves. So you could visit those, and Kangla Fort you did mention was one of the places. So there's a lot more to Manipur, is what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
And yeah, seriously, you've given a clear picture about a lot of us hear about Manipur in the news and stuff happening
just
there.
the wrong type of news, right? We
The wrong
hear the
type,
tensions,
exactly.
etc.
Yeah, but this is like a different perspective altogether about what do you expect there as a traveler who's going there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to know more about say planning an itinerary to Manipur, or even just reading more about your travel stories, etc., what's the best way to
reach out to you, and even about your expressive writing, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. The best way to reach out to me, I'm most responsive over email. Reach out to me over email for any inputs about Manipur or anywhere in the Northeast or anywhere else. Otherwise, and as well as the same for the expressive writing workshops that I do. I'd be more than happy to share any information that folks find and need relevant.
Perfect. We'll add all those links in our show notes section so that people can just go there and refer to it. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been amazing. So glad.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really glad, and especially having been a part of the workshop. As I said, I was waiting to hear stories, your travel stories, on the podcast, and thank you for sharing this with our listeners also, Elita. Thank you. That was yet another great episode of the Musafir Stories. If you guys like the show, please subscribe to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Audioboom, Savan, Pocket Casts, Castbox, Stitcher, or any other podcasting app available on iOS or Android. Please do leave us a review on iTunes. It goes a long way in the show's discoverability. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We go by the handle The Musafir Stories. Or, if it suits you, you could email us at themusafirstories@gmail.com or visit our website at www.themusafirstories.com for more information. All of these links will be made available in the show notes section of each episode. So here's to more traveling, sharing, and inspiring. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, happy travels and goodbye.